Something has shifted behind palace walls. Not with a formal announcement, not with a royal decree, but in the quiet, careful language of negotiation. No headlines, no ceremony, just subtle movement, happening where few are allowed to see. Because whether the public chooses to acknowledge it or not, Prince Harry now finds himself standing at the center of something far more significant than speculation. Something that could shape not just his next move, but the entire direction of his public life. And perhaps his legacy, as the world enters another reflective season. If you are enjoying this video and want to see more updates and insights, don't forget to like this video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on the latest news and discussions. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think about this story. A time when people slow down, pause, reconsider their path. There's a growing sense that reinvention is no longer optional. It's necessary. For some, it's a private journey, a quiet shift in priorities. But for Harry, reinvention is playing out on a global stage. Watched, analyzed, interpreted, every step carrying weight. Away from royal headlines and media debates, life continues in its simplest form. Strangers exchange brief conversations. Moments pass without meaning until suddenly they do. It's often said that the most meaningful interactions aren't the ones where people ask how you are, but the ones that remind you what it feels like to simply exist. To just be, without expectation. And yet, while the world moves through these quiet, human moments, Harry's reality feels anything but quiet. Recently, he stepped back into something familiar, a space he understands better than most. The stage, public speaking, structured environments, carefully controlled narratives. It's what he was raised to do, what he was trained for from the very beginning. And by most accounts, he does it well. There's confidence there, a natural rhythm, a sense of control. For a moment, it almost feels like nothing has changed. But beneath that surface, one question continues to echo. Is that enough? Because beyond the polished appearances, there's a growing perception that refuses to disappear. The role he once held, the identity that once defined him, no longer carries the same weight. And the role he's trying to build now still feels undefined, unfinished. He stands in a space few have ever occupied before. Not quite royal, not quite removed. A public figure navigating unfamiliar ground, where relevance isn't inherited. Oh, it's earned. And then, there's the part of the story that rarely makes headlines. The business. Because behind every appearance, every project, every public move, there are conversations happening quietly in the background. Decisions being made. Strategies being reconsidered. And according to those who follow these shifts closely, something has changed. Take, for instance, the ongoing relationship with Netflix. On the surface, everything appears steady. Professional statements, carefully chosen words, an image of collaboration and mutual respect. But behind that carefully maintained narrative, there are whispers of a different reality, a subtle shift in dynamics, a recalibration. Sources suggest that communication has become more focused, more selective, and increasingly centered around Harry himself, not Meghan. Why? That depends entirely on who you ask. Some point toward financial considerations. Others suggest creative differences behind the scenes. And then there's a simpler explanation, one that carries more weight than any internal discussion. Audience response. Because in the end, it's not executives or insiders who decide what works. It's the audience. There have been projects, ideas that, on paper, seemed promising, concepts that carried potential, but not all of them connected. Not all of them captured attention in the way they were expected to. And in a world driven by engagement, attention isn't just valuable, it's everything. Which brings us to something quietly waiting in the background. A project tied to a world Harry knows intimately. Polo, but not as it's been seen before. Not a repeat of past attempts that struggled to gain traction. Something different. Something that, according to reports, has been developing over time. Refined. reworked, reimagined. And yet, there's a condition, a very specific one. If this project moves forward, Harry cannot remain in the background. He can't simply attach his name or appear in the credits. He must be visible, present, on screen, even if only briefly, a cameo. At first glance, it seems like a small detail, almost insignificant. But in reality, it represents a much larger shift, a change in strategy, because those involved appear to understand something crucial. Harry still commands attention, whether people watch out of admiration, curiosity, or even skepticism. They watch. And in the entertainment industry, attention is power. There's even a moment that seems to have reinforced this idea. A brief appearance on a late-night show. Light-hearted, controlled, carefully framed, but effective. It showed something important. Timing, presence, delivery. A reminder that within the right structure, he can still connect. And so, the strategy becomes clear. Not to place him at the center of the story, but to position him within it. As a presence, a familiar figure, a subtle link to something larger, a legacy, briefly stepping into view. But perhaps just as telling, is who isn't part of this vision. Meghan's absence hasn't gone unnoticed. No official explanation. No clear statement. Just quiet observation. Speculation. Questions without answers. And maybe that's where the real story begins. Not in what's being said, but in what isn't. Because what we may be witnessing is something far more significant than a single project. A repositioning. A shift from a shared identity to an individual path. For years, the narrative has been built around them. A partnership, a united front. But now, the focus appears to be narrowing, becoming more defined, centered on one figure, Harry. And that raises a question that's impossible to ignore. Is this the start of something new? A genuine evolution? A redefinition of purpose? Or is it something else entirely? An attempt to maintain relevance in a world that rarely stands still. A world that moves forward, with or without you. For now, there are no confirmations. No official announcements. Only signs. Subtle movements. Quiet decisions being made behind closed doors. But one thing is clear. The next step won't just impact a project. It will shape perception, define direction, and perhaps determine the future of Prince Harry himself. Because in a world driven by attention, reinvention isn't just a choice. It's survival.